One day I was looking at a Bible atlas. This was probably 7 or 8 years ago, and in that moment I realized that I was a nerdy pastor who looks at Bible atlases. But in this particular atlas illustration, there was a picture of Jerusalem, and it showed not only the place where Jesus died, but also the place where most historians thought he was buried. And I had never seen that before. And that comes from this scripture passage. Let's get this first one up. This is the passage immediately before the one that we just read. It said, "At the place where Jesus was crucified, there was a garden. And in the garden, a new tomb in which no one had ever been laid. Because it was the Jewish day of preparation, and since the tomb was nearby, they laid Jesus there." The Gospel of John, even more than Matthew, Mark, and Luke, operates at all of these different levels at the same time. And the Gospel of John is really trying to tie the story of Jesus with the story of the beginning of the world in Genesis chapter 1. And so he adds this detail that Jesus was buried in a garden, just like Adam and Eve started in the Garden of Eden. And just like this scripture passage starts on the first day of the week, just like how the Bible starts, there was evening and there was morning on the first day. The Apostle John is like saying all of the lights on your dashboard should be flashing. God has broken into the world in the same way that he did when he began the world. And he is beginning the world again in the life, the death, and the resurrection of Jesus. So here's a picture of the Bible atlas that I was talking about. The next slide. So this is the west side of ancient Jerusalem. And the red arrow at the bottom is pointing to Golgotha, or the place of the skull where Jesus died. When Jesus died, they put him on a cross and they escorted him out of Jerusalem like they did with criminals. They brought him to Golgotha, which was an equivalent to the garbage dump. It's where they brought people they were ashamed of. It's where they brought people who were trying to overthrow the empire. And there Jesus died on this hill outside of Jerusalem. The crowds gathered there to watch him die. As you've possibly read or heard in church before, the crowds were shouting at him, and Jesus died on a hill called Golgotha. But if you look at the next slide, the arrow moves to the garden that's not far from Golgotha. And this is the first time I've ever really seen that, where there's this garden near Golgotha on the west side of Jerusalem, where they believe was the cemetery where they brought Jesus, to the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea. So get this, 300 years after Jesus dies and rises again, the Emperor Constantine, this is a historical fact, not a matter of faith, is going on a crusade all over the ancient world trying to find the places that were important in the Bible. Comes to Jerusalem, and they are looking for the place where Jesus died and the place where he rose, so that they could commemorate these places and make them pilgrimage sites. And so they came to this place in Jerusalem, and they said, "We're looking for the place where Jesus was buried." And people were saying, well, for the last 300 years, people said he was buried right over there, like in that tomb right over there. And he said, well, what are the alternative sites? What are the other places that people are claiming? And they're like, there's no alternative site. It's just, for the last 300 years, people have been saying that it's this spot. And so if you went to Jerusalem today, you could go to a place called the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Can I get the next slide? The Church of the Holy Sepulchre is built over what they believe was part of Golgotha, and then part of the tomb. Now go to the next slide. If you go into the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, you can go to a church within a church within a church and come to the place where they believe Jesus was actually buried. Is it for sure? We don't know. Nobody knows if it is for sure. But I do find it really interesting that there's no alternative site. That's the place that for hundreds of years, people are like, that's the spot where we've been saying for all this time that Jesus of Nazareth walked out of the grave. And for moments like that, I don't think that proves anything, right? It might not even convince you of anything. I don't even know if it convinced me of anything. But it just kind of settles in that this is something that's very real. That it happened in a real place, in a real spot. Sometimes when you read the Bible, it feels like it takes place in like a galaxy far, far away, or like in Middle Earth somewhere, and you're like, no, it took place in the Middle East, and you can go to these places where they've been claiming for thousands of years that it happened. And I just think that kind of stuff is amazing. That right there was just the intro to the sermon. I hope you're comfortable. That was just the beginning. So here we are in John chapter 20. I just want to give you a picture of what that looked like and felt like. This tomb that they have in ancient Israel is what they believe was probably similar to the tomb that Jesus was buried in. With a stone that big, takes a couple people to roll it away, and it's on that kind of tomb where Jesus walked out in the middle of the night. And I think it's so fascinating how a few days before this, if you read the Gospel of John, Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead, right? And he did that in front of tons of people. It was a huge event. It was a public spectacle in the middle of the afternoon. That Jesus goes up to this tomb where Lazarus had been buried for 3 days. And he said, "Lazarus, come out." And the stone rolls away, and Lazarus, in the linens, walks out of the tomb. Public event. Many people saw it. So you would think, when Jesus rose from the dead, he'd be like, "Hey, come by around 3 o'clock. Come by around 3 o'clock, because this is going to be amazing." Crowds would have gathered. All those people who came to his death, who were shouting at him, would have come to his resurrection and be like, let's see if he can really pull this off, like people who tightrope across the Niagara Falls or something. Let's see if he can really pull it off. What an amazing thing if he would have done it at like 3 in the afternoon in front of thousands of people. That's not really like God. You know, Jesus came into the world born in a cave, in a manger. First witnesses were shepherds. He comes in through the side door. He comes in through the back roads. Because that's where people live. That's where we really experience things. God shows up in humility to show us what humility really looks like. And Jesus rose from the dead somewhere in the night, really early morning, and no one was around when he rose from the dead. It's just like God to do that. And there's something powerful about that, because it's like while it was still dark, as we said in the litany in the beginning, death had already been defeated. It was a reality before people even knew about it. It was a reality before people even realized it. Death had already been defeated, and love had already won. And as that morning was breaking, people didn't really understand yet that the world had changed. And that's just like God. It's just like Jesus to show up to this woman who we know nothing about, besides the fact that she's from Magdala. And that we only know that because her name's Mary Magdalene. So she's from this little town that we only know of because of Mary Magdalene. She showed up on the western shore of the Sea of Galilee. We know nothing else about her. We don't know if she had brothers and sisters. We don't know what her Myers-Briggs personality type is. We don't know what her income was, what her career was. And I find it fascinating that as Americans, if you were to meet me and talk to me for a little bit, by about sentence number 3, paragraph number 2, "Hi, I'm John, I'm a pastor. I identify with my vocation. I'm an accountant. I'm a teacher." We identify with our vocation. It's kind of strange when you think about it. I am this job, right? And as Americans, we kind of do this. We identify with our work, and we find these things about us. Mary Magdalene, we've got nothing other than the fact that the defining feature of her life is that she found Jesus. That's the thing that we know. The defining feature of her life, the core of her identity, is that she saw the resurrected Christ. And as it turns out, that's the most important thing that could ever happen to you. So it says, early, the first day of the week, all the lights on the dashboard are flashing. So here we go, John 20, verse 1. All the lights on the dashboard are flashing. Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb. We don't know anything about her besides she's from Magdala. And she saw that the stone had been removed from the entrance. So she came running to Peter and the other disciple, the one Jesus loved, and said, "They've taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we don't know where they put him. For her, like, resurrection isn't even on the radar. It's like she shows up, the tomb is empty, it must be that someone stole his body. That's the only explanation. And I think she comes there so clouded by her grief and her pain that she can't even see that life might overcome death, that hope could overcome despair, and that love has already won. She doesn't see it yet. So she comes running to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one Jesus loved, who's the Apostle John, and said, they have taken the Lord out of the tomb. We don't know where they put him. So Peter and the other disciple start running for the tomb. Both were running, but the other disciple outran Peter. Unfortunate for Peter, not the fastest guy. So we only know that from this. And I love that the Apostle John wrote this years after Peter died. So Peter dies around 60 AD. The Apostle John lives to 90 AD, writes the Gospel of John, and he's like, Peter's not here to refute this. So I'm just going to include this little I've got this weird thing with Peter, and I'm just going to include this detail that I was faster. And I just want the world to know that. So he reached the tomb first. He bent over and looked at the strips of linen lying there, but did not go in. And then Simon Peter came along behind him and went straight into the tomb, and he saw the strips of linen lying there, as well as the cloth that had been wrapped around Jesus' head. The cloth was lying in its place, separate from the linen. Finally, the other disciple, who had reached the tomb, also went inside. He saw and believed. They still did not understand from the scripture that Jesus had to rise from the dead. And then the disciples went back to where they were staying. All right, so here it comes. It's like everything comes down to one person. And it's Mary. It's Mary. Mary stood outside of the tomb crying. And as she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb, consumed with grief, pain, feeling let down. Just trying to think of like what kind of emotions we experience like that. It's like the day, 2 days after a loved one dies, and you wake up and you're like, oh, I was wishing it was a dream, but instead it's a nightmare and it's ongoing. It's like the day after, if anybody's ever had to file for bankruptcy, you wake up and you're just like so let down and confused and like broken. You're ashamed of it. Like, how do I tell people this? Do I tell people? Maybe I won't tell anybody. See what happens. It's that deep, just like disappointed, let down, broken. And saw two angels seated in white where Jesus' body had been, one at the head and the other at the foot. And I love this. It's two angels. You would think that could like pull her out, right? Pull her out of the grief and the pain. It's angels. But it's like so thick at that point that even the angels can't get through. They asked her, woman, why are you crying? They've taken my Lord away, she said, and I don't know where they put him. At this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not realize it was Jesus. I feel like two things are happening. And then, remember, it's the Gospel of John, so it's operating on different levels. One is I think she's having that experience where you see somebody out of context and you don't recognize them right away. It's like when you're a kid and you see your teacher at ShopRite. You're like, is that really them? I thought they lived at school. You don't really know. Or like a friend of yours moved to California and you didn't know they were back visiting, and you see them and you're like, that can't be them. They live in California. And we have that moment as human beings where we have this distance from something, this confusion. And so I think there's that. Jesus is dead. There's no way that's him. But on the other deeper level, again, she's so broken by this. She's like, there's no way. Even if he said he could rise from the dead, even though he rose Lazarus from the dead, it's not him. It's not him. Thinking he was the gardener, she said, sir, if you carried him away, tell me where you have put him, and I will get him. And now here comes verse 16, which for me is probably one of the most powerful verses in the whole Bible. And then Jesus said to her, Mary. He said her name. He said her name. And it was when he said her name that it broke through. And she turned, she recognized him. She recognized his voice. She recognized the way that he said her name. She turned around to him and cried out in Aramaic, Rabboni, which means my teacher. What is happening here? I think, even in the beginning of this sermon, I was like giving you historical context of what this may have looked like, where they think that Jesus rose from the dead. So we do like the history thing to kind of understand the resurrection. And then sometimes we do the theological thing to understand the resurrection. Even at the heart of the Apostles' Creed, Jesus died, he was buried, descended to hell. On the third day, he rose again from the dead. He ascended to heaven, and it lives up here, intellectually. Like if I learn enough about this, or if I believe the right things about it, then it will click in, and we're trying to get there with our heads. But Easter begins with our hearts. Easter started with an encounter with this woman who was living with grief and pain. It was just her. And the God who created the universe took the time to stand there with her as she processed it. Took the time, waited. She knew that Jesus said that he was going to rise from the dead, and he didn't say, "Hey Mary, knock on the door here. I told you I was going to do this. You knew. What is the deal with you guys and the rest of the disciples?" It's like he gets there and he's like, I know. And I get it. And he takes the time. And he just says her name, Mary. And it doesn't go here. It goes here. The resurrection is personal before it's theological. It's something that you experience before it's something that you even fully understand. Easter isn't just some idea. He is risen indeed, isn't just some creed to be believed. Easter is something personal. It's something that happens to you. Why? Because Easter started by Jesus saying someone's name and saying her name. He knew her name. And he knows your name. With everything that you're going through, all the things that you try and hide and keep covered up, all those things that you hope people don't notice, all of the brokenness, all of the potential, all of your hopes, all of your dreams, all the pain that you carry, he sees you for who you are. And he says your name. When you read this passage again, take out Mary's name and put in your own. Experience that power. Feel the weight of it. So I stood there with all of my skepticism, all of my doubt, all these different options. But then Jesus said, John. And that's what I knew. Mary came there in despair, and she was surprised by hope. She came there with empty hands, and she was met with communion. The very body, the very blood of Christ standing right in front of her. Friends, maybe you came here today in despair. Maybe you came in confusion. Maybe you came in skepticism. But our prayer for you today is that you're surprised by hope. Maybe you came here today, it's been years. Maybe you're here today and you've never taken communion. You're welcome. All you have to do is bring yourself with empty hands and experience communion.